started and stopped this video a few times now to cough and blow my nose. I am still dealing with the tail end of a cold that was lovingly bestowed upon me by my youngest. I thought I might be in good enough condition to still do another edition of Benji's ASMR book reviews, but this might be a terrible idea and very snotty. So we'll see how this goes. Bear with me. This week I read a charming, cozy, whimsical tale by Dianna Wynne Jones. It is Howl's Moving Castle. I would imagine many modern readers, came to this through the film by Hayao Miyazaki, which is also entitled Howl's Moving Castle. I believe that was the follow-up to Miyazaki's huge hit, Spirited Away. And it's funny, the cartoon follows the book very closely, and then around the third act really veers off into its own thing. And speaking for the movie, that was something that I was always curious about, because oftentimes when you're watching a film, or when I'm watching a film, and the third acts are very hard. I think most scriptwriters will tell you that. Being able to wrap up a story in a satisfactory way is difficult, but third acts also happen to be a place where a lot of films end up doing reshoots, or there might be issues with the actors or actresses. And so a lot of times, if you're watching a movie and you feel like, this doesn't quite follow from, I thought, the storyline that we were telling, many times that will be because you have an internal sense as a reader, as a viewer, of where a story is going. And when, the film deviates from that, you're like, and only then later on you might, look up on TV tropes or IMDb or something and be like, there was trouble on the set, or they had to reshoot the whole third act because the film was ruined or something, or they ran out of money. Anyway, this is neither here nor there. I mean, it is here, but now I'm going there. One of the things that always puzzled me about the Howl cartoon was that I felt that the third act didn't quite resolve the story the way that I thought it was going. And it turns out that even though the cartoon does follow this story for the first two acts very closely, Miyazaki really came up with his own way to end it. And it also has a lot more to do with war and conflict, which is a Miyazaki standard. Many of his films have to do with the destruction and calamity that war creates, having been a child during World War II. And the book doesn't deal with any of the war stuff that is so prominent in that film. And so it's, now that I understand that the cartoon really is its own thing, I think I can appreciate it more for what it is. I don't know that I would rank it as one of my top Miyazaki films, but my kids absolutely love it, because it is, like the book, so charming, and the animation is so lovingly done, and it's actually absolutely gorgeous. Like all of Miyazaki's films, the man hasn't made an ugly film. I say the man, the huge team of animators that he drives like a slave driver, do great films. Miyazaki, wonderful imagination, terrible to work for, in the best way, and also the worst way if you're his son. This is going far afield. I'm not here to talk about Miyazaki's film. I am here to talk about Howl's Moving Castle by Dianna Wynne Jones. I read this book for two reasons. One, because my kids like the movie so much, I thought this might be something that would be fun to read to them. And two, I was hoping that it would answer some questions for me that I had, having watched the film several times. And I can happily say that this is absolutely a book that I would read to my kids. And it also does answer a lot of lingering questions that I had about the movie. So that was nice. It's nice when that happens. I probably won't read this to my kids for a few more years. They're a little too young now, I think, to get into all of the details. But this is a book written for younger readers, but it's not simplistic. I think it's, I'm sure publishers have some kind of a quadrant system or some kind of way of demarcating like how young a book is for. Not being an expert on this stuff, I would say that this book is perfect for readers probably between 11 and 16, maybe? Is that a thing? That being said, I absolutely enjoyed reading it, and I am an old man, as you well know. It's not written in a childish way, but it is written in a way that's very easy to understand, and it flows really well. It's a very quick read, and it tells the tale of Sophie Hatter, who is the oldest of three, and it takes place in a fantasy world where all of the tropes of fantasy come true, or they're real. It's a part of their lives. And one of the things which, if you've read any number of fairy tales, that the novel keeps repeating is that the oldest child of three is usually the most unlucky and the most sure to come to the worst end, because, as we all know, when there's three children in a family, it's the first one goes off to seek their fortune and something bad happens to them, and the second one similarly so, and then it's the third one, the youngest, who ends up winning the princess and getting the magic ring and making their fortune and all that stuff. So Sophie Hatter, being the oldest of three, she sort of goes through life thinking that she's never going to make much of herself, because that's just how it is, and everybody knows that about the oldest in a family. The book doesn't really play too much with more of those tropes. That's really the main one that it hangs its hat on. But it does inform so much of what Sophie does and how she feels about herself, that she's sort of resigned to not being extraordinary, when she is a very industrious, very thoughtful, very clever little lady. I'm debating how best to explain the book, because of course the frame that I'm viewing all of this through is through the movie, and so the most surprising and delightful parts of the book were those places where it gets filled out, or it fills out the details that the movie doesn't go into. For instance, in the movie, you meet one of Sophie's sisters, who's working in a bakery, but in the book, Sophie has two sisters, and confusingly, they actually trade places and uses an illusion spell to look like each other. I won't go into the details there, because I don't need to go into all of that for the book review. But Sophie's relationship with her sisters, with her stepmother, is a very big part of the book, and it's very sweet how much she cares for them. Being an oldest sibling myself, it's always nice to get a little bit of recognition for how much we care about, but also get aggravated by our siblings. Another big difference is that in the film, Howl is, I would guess, he comes off as maybe like late teens, early 20s, boyish, mischievous magician. Whereas in the book, he's actually in his late 20s. I think he's around 27 years old. He is actually from Earth. He comes from the country Wales, which I don't think is like a huge spoiler, but you don't learn that until later. He found this fantasy world and was very much on purpose because he didn't want to live in Wales and study at university for the rest of his life. He wanted to be a magician in a fantasy land, and it's great. There's an interview in my copy of the book. There's an interview with the author at the end of it, and the interviewer actually asks Jones, "What did you think of the film?" And she mentions that she enjoyed it for what it is, and that but she does mention that both Sophie and Howl are both a lot softer and a lot nobler in the film than they are in the book, and that's absolutely true. In the book, Howl is more obviously a coward. He admits to being a coward. He's like, I hate having to do anything brave. I always have to trick myself into doing it. And both he and Sophie are much grouchier and more stubborn than they are in the book. They're just they butt heads immediately, but Howl is also still very kind. And much like in the film, Sophie, after she's been enchanted to be a 90-year-old woman, she barges into Howl's home and makes herself be the cleaning lady so that she can figure out a way to break this spell that she's under. Oh, another big thing is one of the continuing themes in all of Miyazaki's work is war, and how ruinous it is for societies, for families, for relationships, for the land. The ongoing war is a huge part of the story in the cartoon, whereas the book, it is mentioned that the countries could be on the verge of war, but there is no war in the book. One of Howl's main characteristics in the movie is how much he hates the war and how he's been actively working to stop it. Whereas that is not the conflict of the book. For the most part, what's going on in the book is that Howl is trying to figure out a way to stop this curse from, what would we say, from this curse that he's been placed under for it to be fulfilled. And the curse was placed on him by the Witch of the Waste. One of the things that I love the most about Miyazaki's films is how when he has antagonists, more often than not, he wants the conflict to be resolved in a non-violent way. And when you meet the Witch of the Waste in the film, she's nasty. She's not a nice lady, but by the end of it, she ends up being this sort of sweet, doddering old biddy. That is not the case in the book. The Witch of the Waste is the clear antagonist. She is not a good person, and she and Howl don't have this cute little understanding between them. No, it's she's bad. Howl is good, and again, it makes me appreciate more that the movie is its own thing, and it's the kind of story that Miyazaki likes to tell. There is a fantastic battle between Howl and the Witch of the Waste in the book, and it's how do I explain this properly? I know how to explain it. So I enjoy the Lord of the Rings films, and in the Fellowship of the Ring, the first film, there is a battle between two wizards, Gandalf the Grey, Saruman the White. And, as fun as that battle is, it's mostly two old guys like throwing their staves at each other and making them, I don't know, telekinetically push up against walls or fall down on the floor. And it's like, that's nice, but they're wizards. I want to see something crazy, which is why I've always really enjoyed, for those of you who have seen the film, The Sword and the Stone by Disney, when Merlin and Madame, what is it, Mim? They fight each other by becoming different creatures. And like, that's the kind of thing I want to see when wizards are going against each other. Not like in the Harry Potter films where Professor McGonagall and Severus Snape are just shooting like sparks out of their wands at each other. Like, if you're a wizard, like, show me some crazy spells. And that's what happens in the book, where Howl and the witch go against each other, and they become clouds, and they're just fighting over the ocean, and then there's like a boat that's like caught in these waves, and then you find out the boat was actually an illusion created by Howl to distract the witch, and then they both turn into these giant sea monsters, and then they turn into more sea monsters, and all the monsters go off and they fight each other through the streets of this town, and then they go up and they become like a comet, and there's just magic flying everywhere. And like, that's what I want as a fantasy reader. Like, I want to, if you can do spells, if you can do magic, show me what that looks like what that is. And it's a lot of fun. Another big thing, and again, this is definitely a spoiler, so move ahead to, I guess I'll put like a timestamp on this or something. Something that I think is maybe a little bit hinted at in the movie, but isn't really a thing, is that Sophie herself can do magic. And in fact, Sophie's magic is very powerful for what it is. And what it is she can speak life into objects. Like, you find out early on that when she's working in the hat shop, she's very lonely, so she'll speak to the hats. And it's hinted at, like, very subtly in the beginning, and then it comes together towards the end, that the thing she's telling the hats is she ends up making these hats very powerful magical objects. So women who buy these hats in her shop, they end up being very lucky in love or very lucky in their fortunes. And people, flock to the hat shop because they're like, well, I need a hat like that because, this woman married like, a duke, and this woman married the wealthiest man in town, that kind of thing. And it's great because Sophie will, just talk to herself, or she'll talk to her walking stick when she becomes an old woman. And it turns out that she's actually imbuing these things with magical power. And it's something that she has a sense of herself, but it takes like a few different magical people to tell Sophie, like, oh, you're quite a powerful witch. It's really interesting what you're doing. And she's just like, well, no, they can't be talking about me because I'm the oldest sibling, and nothing good ever comes of the oldest siblings. It's just great. It's she doesn't believe in herself, but she still keeps on trucking. And then eventually she's like, all right, well, if everybody tells me I'm doing magic, I guess I'll use this magic to help however I can. She's a good kid. But she's also a curmudgeon. Even before she becomes an old woman, she's a bit of a curmudgeon. And speaking as a curmudgeon, I also appreciate that about her. And it's very sweet because in the film, and again, I'm sorry to keep comparing it to the film, but it's I've seen it so many times with my kids that that's my point of comparison. The romance between Sophie and Howl, it's very sweet. I think I can't count the number of listeners in my audio journey who've told me how much Howl calling Sophie his good girl has just shook them. And that, it's that image at the end of the film when they're sort of flying away, and they're both, the castle is up in the air, and they're both looking over the balcony, and they're there with each other, and it's very sweet. Whereas in the book, it's very much like Howl and Sophie finally like recognize that they both really like having each other around, but they're still both extremely stubborn and have very forceful personalities, and you know that their lives together are going to be oh God, what is it? Jones in her interview actually talks about this. Somebody asks her, the interviewer asked her, we see some of Howl and Sophie's life in Castle in the Air and House of Many Ways. These are the two sequels to Howl's Moving Castle. But do you have an idea of what a typical day in their happily ever after is like? A typical day in the life of Howl and Sophie? Well, there would be at least 2 quarrels, 1 violent argument, and an explosion of strange magic. They are not a quiet pair. And I know, I find that very charming and very different from your typical happily ever after. Sophie and Howl are a good match for each other because they both have these fiery, very adamant, obstinate personalities. And the idea that they both have very unique magic and want to do things their own way, but also care for each other a great deal, I think it's just a great dynamic. Howl's Moving Castle by Dianna Wynne Jones. A wonderful book. A great book for younger readers. I look forward to reading it to my kids when they're just a little bit older. It's great if you like, if you like the film by Miyazaki, pick it up because it's not the same story, but it's a very similar story. When they go in separate directions, but it's with the same characters, and the film is very true to the spirit, I think, of adventure and wonder and magic. This is sort of a slapdash way to wrap up the review, good book. I enjoyed it, and I would love to read more stories with Sophie and Howl in them. So maybe I'll read those other ones down the line. Again, I have 12,000 books waiting to be finished, so who knows when I'll get to that. But I would absolutely read more by Dianna Wynne Jones. Fabulous book, and a wonderful magical world that she created. So thanks for stopping by and bearing with my blocked up nostrils. And books are good. Read books. I still don't have a sign off or anything, so goodbye.